free agency has certainly been fun to this point. We've already seen some old faces move to new places, with some more moves expected to be made in the coming weeks. Taking a look here at the top 10 NBA free agents, according to CBS Sports.com, and some of the moves that have been made to that point. Of course, everyone's still trying to figure out Miles Turner and the Bucks, what they've got going on up there. We're also got our eyes on Jonathan Kuminga. He has yet to find a destination, but we've seen some moves made already. So let's break down what we've seen to this point. And to do so, we welcome in CBS Sports basketball analyst Sam Quinn. And Sam, we're going to start the conversation at number 10 with the Suns, who of course set the tone in free agency, trading Kevin Durant to the Rockets. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But we want to start the count here when Phoenix traded for Mark Williams during the draft. How did that move help set Phoenix up for success in 25, or did it?
Yeah, I really like that move, right? You look at the price that the Lakers paid to get Mark Williams at the deadline. It was a king's ransom, right? An unprotected pick, unprotected swap, Dalton Connect. The Suns got him for like half of that price, maybe even less. It's a 29 pick and a deeply protected future pick. When you're a team that's in as deep as the Suns are, that have given up as many assets, as many tax problems, you have to take upside swings on riskier players like this. Mark Williams might just be too injury prone to be a long-term starter, but they paid so little to get him in the grand scheme of things that the talent upside here is so considerable. I really like the move. And worst case scenario, if the injuries do prove to be too problematic, you also drafted Kaman Maluwatch at number 10, so you're set at center either way. I just really like high upside, high risk swings like this. If it works, that's the sort of thing that can help dig Phoenix out of the hole that it's dug for itself.
Yeah, looking at that starting five, it definitely is a little jarring because it looks so different than what it has in years past. But hey, the Suns were one of the worst teams in the NBA last year, just 36 and 46. So something clearly had to change. Let's go over to the West, Sam, where the Cavs are trying to hold on to that top spot in the conference. They did a swap with the Bulls to acquire Isaac Okoro. They sent Lonzo Ball on his way. What do you think? Who won this trade in your opinion?
I love this trade for Cleveland. Look, another case of a health risk, right? Lonzo Ball has not played much over the last several years. When healthy, he brings a dimension to the Cavs that they just didn't really have, right? They didn't really have a really good guard defender, Okoro more of a wing. He had proven so unplayable in the playoffs because nobody guarded him from deep, right? Okoro would make his shots in the regular season and then disappear when the games counted. Lonzo Ball, a very good shooter in his own right. I also love the playmaking element that he's going to bring to Cleveland in transition. That's a team that wasn't great in transition last year. It's a different look for them offensively. Introduce a little bit more ball movement to an offense that ranked 28th per game in passes. I just really like the fit, and especially at the cost.
I remember covering Isaac Okoro when he was playing college ball at Auburn, and when he got drafted to Cleveland, everyone was so excited about the potential there. So we'll have to see how he fits. But either way, a good trade there. Let's go to number 8, where we find the unicorn, Kristaps Porzingis, part of a 3-team trade that saw him landing in ATL. We know Porzingis is a proven winner, Sam, but does come with some injury concerns. That's kind of been a theme we've seen to this point, but you got to think Trae Young is happy with how free agency has gone to this point.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the Hawks have found a formula around Trae Young where they surround him with these big athletic wings who can protect him defensively. But the downside to having so many players like that is that it gets harder to space the floor. So what do you do when you need to space the floor? You bring in an elite shooting big man like Kristaps Porzingis, who will fit really well with their existing center, Onyeka Okongwu. Two different looks that you could put in there. You throw in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They've really, really improved over the last few weeks. Now, are they a championship contender? I mean, I think that's going to take some time, right? But they've gotten the sort of players they've needed to around Trae Young. He's extension eligible this offseason. He's out there actively recruiting free agents for them. You have to feel very good about his place on the team, how committed he is to them moving forward, and Porzingis should be a great fit.
All right, we'll talk more about the Hawks and what they've done this offseason in just a minute. That also came with a second-round pick swap there, or they get the second-round pick in 2026. Let's talk about the Lakers, Sam. Unclear about what's going on in LA right now. Everyone said we need a center, so they go out and get DeAndre Ayton. It's a 2-year deal, and he fills the hole. They also give Jackson Hayes the extension just to be safe. When we talked to Ashley Nicole Moss when this all went down, she said it still doesn't make LA a contender. But what do you think?
I have a lot of questions about everything else going on in Los Angeles. I just want to point out that they went into a playoff series last year basically without a center, right? J.J. Redick doesn't trust Jackson Hayes to play real minutes in the playoffs for all of the questions people have about DeAndre Ayton, and there are a lot of them, right? They got a 16-10 center for $8 million. That's very, very good value. Now, are you going to run into a lot of the same issues that Portland did and Phoenix did with the effort, the commitment, the willingness to do the dirty work? Sure. I'm totally fine with the concept that DeAndre Ayton just might not be the player that the NBA hoped he would be. But for $8 million, I'm happy to get a look at that talent, bring him into a culture where we're going to have great playmaking with Luka and, let's say, hopefully LeBron. You know, there's a lot of pressure on him. He's in a contract year, basically. If he wants to get another big contract, he's going to have to recommit to the things that he did when the Suns made the finals in 2021. I love the risk versus reward factor here. If it doesn't work out, it's $8 million, whatever. If it does, you have a chance to get a ton of surplus value.
Yeah, you mentioned LeBron James and his future. We have seen some reports this morning, and this makes me sick, about him potentially being interested in going to Dallas, linking back up with Kyrie and AD. We have seen that Dallas is only interested if it's a buyout situation. That would mean that James is a free agent. I'm good on it, Sam. We're going to move on and leave it there because it is just reports, but certainly something to monitor as the season goes on. Let's talk about number 6. The Pacers, of course, dealt a tough hand when their star Tyrese Halliburton tore his Achilles in the NBA Finals. Then they lost Miles Turner. We talked about that at the top. He is now a Buck. But there is some hope in Indy. They got their 2026 pick back in this year's draft. So kind of sets them up for success in the future, Sam. But I don't know. What do you think about Indy right now?
This was a very sneaky but very beneficial trade. It happened during the NBA Finals when Tyrese Halliburton had not torn his Achilles yet, but was playing through the calf injury. Indy looked ahead and thought, let's maybe hedge our bets here a little bit. Let's prepare for the worst. They swapped the number 23 overall pick in this year's draft, which they didn't have minutes for anyway, right? The Pacers are so deep, or at least were at the time, that they weren't going to bring in a rookie and use him. So they turned that pick into next year's pick back, which they traded to get Pascal Siakam. And then after that, in the weeks that follow, you lose Tyrese Halliburton to the Achilles, you lose Miles Turner in free agency. Suddenly they look like geniuses, right? They get control of their pick back. If they're bad next year, and look, there is a chance that they are, given everything they've gone through since the end of the finals, they can at least benefit from that by getting their pick back. You know, look, we've seen over the last 2 years, teams who've won the lottery were in the play-in tournament, right? You don't have to be the worst team in the league to really benefit from having your own pick. The Pacers have set themselves up potentially to take advantage of this bad year that they're going to have, reload, and come back with Halliburton for the 2026-27 season in stronger shape.
Yeah, we've really just seen the impact of the injury bug over in the East. You got Tyrese Halliburton. We also saw Boston make some moves as well. They've offloaded a lot of their roster in order to manage the financial situation they've got with Jason Tatum, who also tore his Achilles there. They have made some moves. We talked about Porzingis earlier. They also shipped Drew Holiday out to Portland in exchange for Anthony Simmons. How do you think that move set Boston up for success?
I can't believe the Celtics managed to get off of the last 3 years and $100+ million on Drew Holiday's contract without giving up a first-round pick, right? We're in the most cost-conscious era in NBA history. Teams are shedding money left and right. They're terrified of long-term deals, and Boston moves a 35-year-old on the decline. Not only do they not have to give up picks to get rid of that contract, they bring in Anthony Simons, who's like a good player, right? Is he a star? No, he's a very good offensive player who's going to give them a different look. He's a little bit better at getting to the paint, you know, operating off the dribble than most of their guards had been in the past. It's going to be a new look for them on offense. Now, this is a bit of a gap year for Boston, right? Jason Tatum presumably is going to miss the season. They're probably not contending for the championship, and that's fine. They're going to get the year to look at Simon, see, can he be a long-term piece for us? If so, great. We've turned a 35-year-old into a 27-year-old. If not, he's a free agent. You let him walk. You saved all that money on the contract. Great bit of business for Boston in either direction.
No surprise the Celtics went out and got a three-point shooter to add to their game plan that we've seen out of Boston for so many years now. All right, let's go to the Magic, Sam, because the number one complaint about Orlando last year was that they couldn't shoot. So they went out, they got Desmond Bane, who is a proven three-point shooter. He also is a proven scorer. Where do you see the Magic competing next year with Bane in the mix?
Yeah, I think they're one of the best teams in the East, right behind New York and Cleveland. So this was a very tricky trade for Orlando to make, and they certainly paid a heavy price to get Desmond Bane. But if you looked at all the players they had been linked to, Simons had been a name that was linked to them for a long time, Darius Garland as well. The problem with those guys was that they really would have compromised the defensive culture that Orlando's built. You know, they were a top 3 defense the last 2 years. The Magic really wanted to improve their offense, improve their scoring without sacrificing that on defense. The number of guys who could have done that for them, it's a very, very short list, right? How many really high scoring guards are there that aren't also traffic cones on defense? It's a short list. They get one of the few guys out there that fit what they were doing. He fits their balance sheet as well. That team's about to get expensive. Paolo Banchero's going to get a max contract. Franz Wagner starts his max contract this year. So they've jumped in a way where they're not only going to be maybe the 3rd best team in the Eastern Conference, they've done it in a way that's probably sustainable, that they should have several bites at the apple here with a relatively young roster. I think there's a very good chance that Orlando makes the finals at some point in the next several years. And if they do so, this trade is going to be one of the catalysts.
All right, music to our Jacqueline D'Agostino's ears. We also saw they re-signed Mo Wagner on a 1-year deal worth $5 million. So the Magic trying to stay in contention out in the East. Let's go over to Denver, where we saw a swap for Michael Porter Jr. He's now a Net. Cam Johnson, you are now a Nugget. I'm just curious, though, Sam, with what Denver has going on and what we saw from them a year ago, is that enough to help the Joker get another title?
I think the Nuggets did very, very well this offseason, right? Purely as a basketball proposition, I think Cam Johnson is a better player than Michael Porter Jr. He's better off the dribble. They're similar shooters. He's a better defender. But the other benefit of this trade is that they shed around $18 million in the deal. That not only gets them below the luxury tax, gives them some more room to maneuver. You know, they've added a lot of good players this offseason, right? Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr. We're still waiting for the Jonas Valanciunas situation to, figure itself out. Either he comes and they have a very good backup center, or he doesn't, and you have almost the full mid-level exception to work with to bring in more talent. The starting lineup had never been a problem in Denver, right? No matter who you put around Nikola Jokic, he's going to be fine. They're going to win those minutes. They needed to revamp the supporting cast and the bench so they could survive if he sat 4 or 5 minutes in the first or second half. They've done that. They've really improved the bench, and they've done it in a way without compromising their starters. I'm very bullish on what the Nuggets have done this offseason.
They are always a contender when number 15 is in the mix. Let's go to number 2. We go back to Atlanta, as I mentioned earlier, Sam. So they secured Porzingis, but they also traded their 13th overall pick in this year's draft to New Orleans in exchange for an unprotected 26th first-rounder. What does this tell you about what the Hawks are trying to do going forward?
This was like one of the most stunning draft night trades I remember in a long time, right? They moved down 10 spots, and okay, Derek Queen, probably a better draft prospect than Asa Newell was, but this pick that they got from New Orleans, I think that's one of the most valuable first-round picks that's ever been traded, right? It's an unprotected pick in the next season from the team that just had the 4th worst record in the NBA. And if that wasn't enough, it comes attached to swap rights from the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the Bucks did just add Miles Turner, sure, but there's a lot of downside risk there, right? If Giannis ever gets hurt, if he decides to ask for a trade, the Bucks could be a disaster. So this pick is among the most valuable picks I ever remember getting traded, especially during the draft. If this goes south for either New Orleans or Milwaukee, Atlanta has not only added all of these valuable players this offseason between Porzingis and Alexander Walker and Luke Kennard, they've set themselves up to maybe get a star next offseason. And look, I know the talk around Atlanta this offseason has been, oh, that's very cute. They're going to be a 4 or 5 seed. Good work. They need another star around Trae Young if they're going to really leap into championship contention. This pick could be their path to getting that star. So this was one of my favorite moves of the entire offseason. The Hawks got better now, but they also got a lot better later.
All right, so we're giving the Hawks an A for their offseason moves to this point. But listen, Sam, we all knew what the number 1 play so far through the offseason has been. It is that KD trade. Kevin Durant going to the Rockets. He leaks up with a young core, but they went toe-to-toe with the Warriors squad that's battle-tested a year ago. Now you insert Kevin Durant into that mix. How much better do you think the Rockets got with this move?
Yeah, the Rockets were good at basically everything last year, right? Number 1 in rebounding, number 5 in defense, number 7 in fast break points. The one thing they really needed was that half-court scorer, somebody who could get them tough buckets late in games. Well, they got the guy for that, right? That's Kevin Durant. You're not even getting, the DeMar DeRozan knockoff or something. You're getting the absolute best possible player for the need that you had. And you look at what they gave up, right? Kevin Durant is essentially replacing Jalen Green, who had one good game against Golden State and did very little else in that series. You give up Dylan Brooks. Okay, let's just go sign Dorian Finney-Smith to replace him, so his loss isn't really going to be felt. You give up the number 10 pick. They didn't have minutes for that player anyway, right? Last year they took Reed Sheppard, number 3, and he barely played. So I was pretty dubious they were going to keep the number 10 pick anyway, and they just casually turned it into Kevin Durant. So look, right now, I think Houston is probably the second, if not the third best team in the Western Conference. They have a very real chance to win the championship this season with Kevin Durant. But even if they don't, they didn't give up any of their premium assets to get him, right? They didn't give up those future Phoenix picks that look so valuable. They didn't give up Alperen Şengün or Amen Thompson. If they wanted to make another significant trade in the somewhat near future, say for that Greek guy who lives in Milwaukee, I think that's still on the table for them.
I can't even imagine KD and Giannis on the same team in Houston being a Dallas girly. It's too much to think about, so we're not going to. Sam Quinn breaking down the latest in free agency. Everyone chasing the Thunder, but Houston might have a good chance there. Taking a look at the upcoming dates in the NBA schedule. Of course, all eyes on the Summer League, set to kick off on the West Coast later this summer. Actually, tomorrow, July 5th, is when that gets started. And then you got the free agent signing periods opening up on the 6th, and then that Summer League in Vegas, July 10th through the 20th.